Hello, so the volume seems to be temperamental again. I do apologize for that. I'll just try and speak as loud as I can. I've come up now to the Liberal Democrats in going through my analysis of the main parties coming into this 2017 general election. Um, this one is of particular interest to me because, as some of you may know, I was formerly a member of the party and I stood twice at council level in 2008 and 2010. But I left the party in 2010 and I haven't been attached to any political party since that time. This is going to be an interesting election for the Liberal Democrats in light of what happened in 2015. So, a little bit of a recap: 2015 was a disaster for the Liberal Democrats. That year, they were absolutely, to put a metaphor, slaughtered in the polls. Um, they were absolutely hammered in a way that's I don't think any other political party has seen in those sort of proportions in recent times. And that was a particularly bad year because Charles Kennedy, the widely respected former leader of the party, passed away at just 55 in very sad circumstances. So it was a very challenging year for the Liberal Democrats. They went from having 57 MPs to just 8 MPs. I believe they've got 9 now. I think they perhaps won another seat in a by-election. I'm not 100% sure about that. But clearly the party has a lot of traction to make. Now, the Daily Mail had an interesting analysis today, and I'm just going to look at this and read it out. Lib Dem target seats for this election: Kingston and Surbiton, Twickenham, Bath, Cheltenham, Cambridge, Bermondsey and Old Southwark. And some of the major figures in the party, Ed Davey, Vince Cable and Simon Hughes, may well try to regain their seats. What is interesting is that the party has approved 50% of its defeated candidates to be re-selected. That indicates to me that the party isn't blaming those candidates for their loss, but rather it was the circumstances of the time. I do feel that it was the results in 2015 were a backlash against Nick Clegg's decision to go into coalition government, among other reasons. Probably a backlash from young voters on the tuition fees issue, which really did run deep against Nick Clegg personally and the party. Um, I don't think the Lib Dems deserved the defeat they got in 2015, but that's unfortunately a fact that when a coalition government goes into election, it's always a junior partner that suffers. In Britain, we are not used to coalition governments, and I find that somewhat unfortunate insofar as I don't believe the principle of coalition is necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying it was necessarily right in 2010, but I do feel that there is a situation where there's huge skepticism in this country about that, and that's unfortunate. Because sometimes parties should work together for the good of the nation. This idea that parties should always be tribal, I'm not a fan of. Um, Nick Clegg was clearly a very capable politician, is a very capable politician. Tim Farron is nowhere near as well known, in part because the party's a lot smaller than it was. But if there's one thing that the Liberal Democrats have shown over the years is that they are capable of being comeback kids. Apparently, yesterday when Theresa May announced this election, they were gaining membership by 1,000 people an hour. That's incredible. That really is a fast pace. I suspect what will happen is they will gain a few seats, and there will be a lot of disaffected pro EU Labour people who will go to Tim Farron's Liberal Democrats on the grounds that they felt that Jeremy Corbyn was simply on the fence too much about this very important issue. Um, Labour will refute that, but I think it's true. I think until the last days, Labour seemed to be quiet about the EU referendum. Certainly, Mr. Corbyn seemed to be. Um, and I do think if he had something profound to say, it would have been picked up. Um, that isn't to say that the Dems should take anything for granted. They have a long way to go, and I think they know that they are not going to be a party of government. Therefore, they can afford to campaign to their base, which is by and large young pro Europeans. That's no exaggeration. And it's no stereotype. That is largely the Lib Dem base, young pro Europeans. Now, just a few words about Tim Farron and the current situation with the Liberal Democrats, and also my thoughts on them. Nick Clegg has just been interviewed on Newsnight. It was an interesting interview because he was asked about the issue of Tim Farron's personal faith contradicting being a Liberal Democrat. Now, Tim Farron's a practicing Christian, and apparently he has socially somewhat conservative views on issues like homosexuality. But Nick Clegg made a very good point. He said that it is very important that his private views are not confused with his views as a legislator. Tim Farron has never ever indicated to me that he's homophobic in any way whatsoever. So this is an interesting thing because that to me is true liberalism. Nick Clegg saying this, a man should be free to practice his faith privately so long as it doesn't impose on others. In other words, if Tim Farron, for example, has moral reservations about gay marriage, that is entirely his right. But as a legislator, putting forward the message of Liberal Democrats, um, if he exposed those views, if he espoused those views, that would be problematic. In other areas, though, I feel the Lib Dems are far too quiet. And let me try and clarify what I mean by this. What I expect from a Liberal Democratic Party, a centre left Liberal Party, is to be outspoken on values that they purportedly believe in. Issues like gender equality, issues like tolerance, issues like equal opportunity, these sort of things. Now, there is one area in particular I am very, very wary of the Liberal Democrats, and I have a big problem with this, and that is Islamism. My concern about the Liberal Democrats is they are a typical left wing party. They're too politically correct, too hesitant to speak out about this. This is not to say that they never say anything, but I think they have to be on the forefront of condemning Islamist ideology. The Lib Dems are far quicker to denounce the populist right than they are fascist Islamism. As a former member of the party, I think that's a problem because if mainstream parties, if mainstream figures don't speak out about this and call it what it is, then of course fringe movements are going to get this. They're going to pick it up. And so if people are being politically correct about talking about Islamism and also talking about regressive aspects of the religion of Islam, i.e., blasphemy laws, then as far as I'm concerned, they're not practicing the principles as liberals. I really believe this party should be in the forefront of condemning honor killings. And I know that's not an Islamic issue, I'm just making the point generally of virtue signaling. They should be on the forefront of condemning issues like that. Instead, frankly, they're quiet. Now, they may argue, oh, we do say things, we've got white papers on this and that, but you have to be outspoken about these things. It's no good, for example, making generic condemnations of violence. I put this point on their Facebook page because it was something I am concerned about. The response was, oh, we condemn violence generally. That's not good enough. My question was specifically about Islamism. So a response like, we condemn violence from all groups. No, I'm asking specifically about this. You cannot be politically correct on something like Islamism. You just can't. Because as far as I'm concerned, being politically correct on an issue like that is trying to skirt over the issue. So for me, that is a major sticking point, and I want to be proved wrong. I want someone in the Liberal Democrats to say, this is our policy on Islamism. We are outspoken about it. I have seen no evidence of that. And yeah, it frustrates me because I think this is a party that is centrist in nature, but really, really runs the risk of being regressive left. Why? Because they're politically correct, because they get involved in virtue signaling, and it's this grave mistake of confusing tolerance and being outward looking and all the rest of it, which are all good qualities, with simply being naive. The Lib Dems will always contend this, and I don't believe they're as reckless as the Green Party is. But I'm not convinced that they're going to be outspoken on these important issues. I believe they should be. I really do. Um, I believe that is absolutely liberal to be outspoken on those issues because Islamism is the polar opposite of liberal values. So you would think a party that calls itself the Liberal Democrats would be on the forefront. So when we see, I'm not just talking about Islamist attacks, but I'm talking about the horrendous situation that goes on regarding um, the recruitment of Islamists to go to Syria, the attacks disproportionately by migrant men on European women. This is not scaremongering, it has happened. The Lib Dems shouldn't be afraid to speak about those things. And this pathetic way that so many on the left respond to people talking about this, oh, it's racism, you're pandering to the far right. The point I would make is the far right gain traction when these things are not discussed. And yeah, it angers me. Anyway, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent. I've already spoken on this one longer than the other videos, so we'll leave it there. I think the Lib Dems will make some gains, but if I was ever to endorse this party again, I would want to know that they would be absolutely prepared to speak out on these things. And I'm not saying Islamism is the only issue. Of course, it's right that they are outspoken against neo Nazi groups and all the rest of it. But I don't think there is an equilibrium at the moment. I think Islamism is a far greater threat, proportionally speaking. Um, and I want them to be more outspoken on this. I really do take issue with that. I also think in their position of being so pro-European, they do have to be careful not to look undemocratic and to give the impression that they're completely disregarding the 17 million people who voted Leave and viewing them as racist. That would be a very, very stupid mistake for the Liberal Democrats to make, to get into frankly liberal snobbery and look down on anyone with a different opinion from themselves. There could be a tendency to do that. I understand they know that they're not going to be in government, so they will be pitching to the base. But I also think it is important to be responsible in reaching out. Okay, yeah. Thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe and share the video.